Welcome back, listeners, to another episode of Arts and Crimes. I'm your host, Kelly Boyles.
I'm the guest co-host, Brandon Boyles.
I'm the guest co-host, Josh Boyles.
Excellent. Thank you guys for chiming in so quickly.
Yes, way better than last week.
Mm-hmm.
We're on top of things.
Yes. Welcome. Thank you for everybody coming back. Also, we did so good. You did so good.
I was born practicing.
For this. Yeah, you
Dang
were.
It.
You were born to practice for it. Oh, perfect. Okay. So, today I started out feeling like this was a really fun one, and then I was like, this guy's actually kind of a terrible guy. But, I mean, it's still fun, but he's not as great a guy as I thought, so you can tell me what you think at the end.
You know, we did two episodes about witch hunters, so...
Okay, he's better than those guys.
Killed thousands of people, probably.
Yeah,
so.
I guess that's a high bar, or a low bar, I guess. Whatever. Have you guys heard of Han von Meegeren before, ever?
Han von Meegeren?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great name.
I can confirm that I have not.
Okay, perfect. I didn't think that you had, but just thought I'd double check.
Han von or von Han?
Han von Meegeren.
Han von Meegeren.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just create a mnemonic device. Mnemonic device. Han von.
Han von.
Because H comes before V in the alphabet.
Sure does.
So every time you think about the name, say the whole alphabet first, and then you can go Han von.
And then you'll know. Okay, so here's who Han von Meegeren was in sort of a nutshell, so you know what we're looking for. So he was a master art forger. And this was, I mean, we're going back, we're still in sort of World War II times, like the previous episode, but from a different angle. So he's a Dutch art forger that was taken to... my notes just disappeared for a second.
Oh, that was the strangest named city. He was taking to.
I practiced.
It's a musical language they speak there.
I practiced the pronunciation for hours.
Yeah.
No, what happened was my notes disappeared and it scared me.
Am I saying this right? Ha ha.
Your accent is a little weird, but it's okay. I think they'll understand what you're saying. But he was taken to jail, accused as a Nazi sympathizer and selling Dutch national treasures to Nazis during the war. And the way he proved that he wasn't conspiring with the Nazis or selling national treasures to the Nazis was that the national treasures that the Dutch government and like museums paid millions for, they were all forgeries of his. And that's how he got, that's how the trial kind of went down.
Okay, so I was going to say he was tricking Nazis, but he tricked his own government first.
Yeah. Which is why at first you're like, ho-ho, and then you're like, uh-oh. So I wanted to kind of start so we have like an idea of the direction we're going. And so if we go back to the very beginning, it's a very good place to start.
I got that one.
Thank you.
No.
It's not Lord of the Rings.
All right. So Han von Meegeren was born October 10th, 1889. I'm kidding. Yeah. No, that's right. I know numbers.
That's a really good joke, though. Leave that one in.
I think this episode will post October 11th. So like the day after his birthday. So that's fun.
Good planning on your part.
Yeah, it's absolutely on purpose. So he was the third of 5 children, and his mother was Louisa Henrietta Camps, and his father was Hendrikus Johannes von Meegeren, who was a French and history teacher. So what's funny is that his father hated that Van Meegeren was interested in art. He absolutely did not support it.
It was the opposite of Andy Warhol's parents.
The exact opposite. In fact, his father used to make him write like 100 times in a row, I know nothing, I am nothing, I am capable of nothing. Like, what? What
That's
a terrible
bold
dad.
parenting decision.
Like, I just was so shocked by that. Anyways, his dad was like, no art for you. Yeah, and made him take architecture classes at the university. And Von Meegeren wasn't into that. And eventually, even though he did really well in school and passed all of his exams, he skipped out on the final exam, didn't get his degree, and went to an art school. So he went to an art school and he got married, had a kid, and in 1914 he completed his diploma examination at the Royal Academy of Arts, which allowed him to teach. He could teach art as well as be an artist. And then he had another kid, and then from there he sort of had his one moment of fame under his own name. So he painted a deer.
A female deer.
Yeah.
So it wasn't crazy popular at first, but then he spread the story that it was the Queen's favorite deer that he had done, and it went wild. Like, people loved it. Apparently, like, it was in most homes. Everybody bought it. He was really famous for it.
Did the Queen have a favorite deer?
I have no idea. There was no actual like information about the Queen's favorite deer that I bothered to read.
That seems like a weird lie to tell. Like, extremely easy to disprove.
Yeah.
Unless the Queen was just like, I don't care about deer. Yeah, that, like, all deers look alike.
Sure.
So she's like,
That could be it.
yeah, that's probably my favorite one.
Yeah, that's it. I think it's funny because it is sort of the direction he goes with the rest of his art career shortly after this.
The lying part?
The lying and deception. Yeah, not the deer.
It's all deer art. I don't know why that would be more exciting to me. Like, they got the dogs, you know, they're like playing poker, but instead it's deers in royal gowns.
They're like playing shuffleboard or something.
Deers is not, sorry.
The
Deer.
creation of Adam.
Deer.
With
deer.
deer.
Brandon, you made an art joke. I'm so proud of you.
Hey, this podcast rubbing off on me, maybe.
Okay, yeah. So anyways, he painted this deer. He got kind of famous for it. And he actually ended up traveling around to like Belgium and France and Italy and England, being a fairly successful portrait painter.
Of deer.
Of actual humans this time.
But he made them look like deer.
Yeah.
They're wearing the right clothes, but deer faces.
But deer faces. No, they were actual portraits. And I saw a bunch of them. And the thing is they weren't bad. Like, he was obviously very skilled. There was like kind of a messy painterly quality to them that was enjoyable, if you know what I mean when I say that.
Is painterly...
Is it like where you have to step back from the picture a ways to see it better? If you get too close, it kind of looks like blurs and blobs.
I mean, not entirely. So painterly is like, I mean, you can see the paint brushes and the brush strokes, and you can see kind of the painter's touch. So he became a like fairly prolific portrait painter and was mildly successful. But his art wasn't really well received by critics. So anytime that he got, you know, stuff written about him, it was never good. And they said stuff like he was a gifted technician who has made a sort of composite facsimile of the Renaissance school. He has every virtue except originality. Let me read that again. That was terrible.
Okay.
I did a bad job.
I thought that was great.
Yeah.
I
thought
did.
it was fine.
It was pretty dang good.
It was bad.
What I'm curious is, do you agree with their assessment?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, not in like, I think there's a lot of promise, and I think he just wasn't painting a long time. So every artist, when they start out, they kind of start out copying what they like, right? Mm-hmm. So as you copy what you like, you sort of start learning and adapting and changing and innovating so that you're kind of creating these new different things. Like even Andy Warhol, he was creating really innovative stuff, but it was stuff that he had sort of started seeing and learning in college from his professors and from the other students and from other artists. And then he was sort of pushing it And so it might be that the critics at this time were saying, like, he's not pushing it into any kind of innovative zone. But it very well could be that he just hadn't hit that stride yet. Everybody kind of gets to that point at a different time. Like Van Gogh was like what, in his 30s or 40s or something? He was old and he only painted like 28 paintings and that was it. Maybe he was, I don't know. Anyways, he didn't start painting till later in his life.
Yeah.
Like really anything that is kind of noteworthy.
Interesting. Right. I would really love a comparison between artists of the same, talking about what is original about them. So do that for us later.
I'll figure that out.
Yeah.
But yeah, he had just really negative reviews from art critics. And another part of the issue was that this was a time where like avant-garde and modern art and that kind of stuff was happening in the art world, like Picasso. And he hated that type of art. He hated it.
Okay, this guy is my guy.
Because the two things you're known for is you love deer and you hate Picasso.
It's true. So yeah, he and the people that he learned from, like his professors and his kind of mentor, because also generally you have like a mentor of some kind, and that definitely shapes a lot of what you do.
Yeah.
So he at this time sort of really got hurt and offended by these negative responses from the critics. And in his own like testimony later, this is when he decided he was going to get revenge. And so he wanted to get revenge in the best way that he could, which was to like prove them all idiots, that they didn't really know what they were talking about and that he had these skills, and all that kind of stuff.
I love where this is going.
Okay.
Right?
Yes.
Because, like, they say I'm unoriginal. I'll show them I'm super original by copying a bunch of artists and making forgeries.
Okay, but he adds a twist.
Oh.
This is where he starts being clever.
Okay.
So, okay, first thing he wanted to do
The
was...
twist is they're all deer.
It's his signature move.
Yeah.
And then I imagine the camera like zooming in every forgery and there's like a hidden deer somewhere, like,
Yeah.
Wah! And there's a deer hidden in this masterwork.
Yeah. It's his calling card.
Exactly. So
My role on this podcast is just to hyperfixate on one stupid detail and keep being like, it's all about the deer. So that's my...
okay, so here's what he did. He decided that he was going to pick the most beloved and well-known Dutch master, which was Vermeer, Johannes Vermeer. Have you guys heard of him at all?
I have heard of Vermeer.
Yeah. Do you know which paintings he's famous for?
The girl with the pearls
Earring.
necklace. Earring. Dang it.
You were really
I knew
close.
it was some kind of pearl something.
Yeah.
My mind was firmly in the region of accessories, sir.
Yes.
Okay, I do know of that painting.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, he was a
I
painter.
know of Vermeer.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Vermeer was a
The girl
17
with the pearl necklace.
pearl earring.
ZZ Top has a song about that.
I need to make it as offensive as possible and then bring in the deer again. It's the deer with the pearl necklace is the name of the piece of painting art. No, you can't cut it. I believe ZZ Top has a song about a deer with a pearl necklace. Correct me if I'm wrong.
No, that sounds about right.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was a top hit. Okay, freaking Vermeer. So, Johannes Vermeer was a 17th century master. This is during the Baroque period. And
I believe you mean Baroque. Sorry.
Why did you die?
because he killed.
Oh, that's what it was.
Yeah, that was the audio version
Slay.
of the skull emoji that I just did there for you. And the youths use the skull emoji to mean funny.
They do, yeah.
do?
I can
Yeah.
confirm that.
You guys are so weird.
Yeah, if you make the laughing emoji, they straight away know that you're like a millennial.
Yeah. It's even worse if
then.
you type out ha ha ha.
Do you type out
Yeah, you don't. It's just
the
the skull.
emoji.
skull emoji means funny?
Just if you're on the phone with another youth and you would have laughed, you don't laugh anymore. You just go, ugh.
Yeah, you just
Sometimes the next generation makes me feel like I'm Drax. And I'm just like, thumb across neck means dad. Right, guys?
Yeah,
And they
exactly.
they put up with you because you're lovable. Continuing.
This podcast is really going to connect to the youth of today.
I cut all of it so that it's just you being like, yay, youth, youth, yay, youth.
No, do the Gen Z cut. It's just us going,
That really got me. Yeah, very funny.
Do you think that's going to be the after the podcast is over joke?
I never know. It's a call I make very late at night often.
yeah, the best time to make this. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm slowing us down. We were on Johann Vermeer,
Johannes Vermeer.
Johannes.
creator of the famous deer with pearls in its eyeballs.
Yeah, so Baroque artist. If you're curious, the Baroque time period was about 1600 to 1750. And Vermeer was he was born 1632 and he died 1675. So he was only 43. And something about Vermeer that has been kind of disputed, or not disputed, but like it's something that the critics have spoken of, is that there's a relatively few amount of Vermeer paintings. There's only just over 30 that we can more or less confirm are actually his. And the problem is that he has a lot of early works and a lot of late works. So there's a really big gap in between. And there was a critic in particular, his name was Dirk Hennema, and he pointed this out and felt very strongly that there should be art from that kind of middle period where like that bridges that gap of his early work and the later work, because his later work is much more like slice of life kind of paintings. Girl with a pearl earring, he has the milkmaid, woman reading a letter, like stuff like that. But like Baroque art generally has a lot of very religious tones to it. In fact, it's often done in a way where it's meant to sort of shock and awe the religious viewer.
Shock and awe.
Shock and awe.
Moses with a machine gun. Shock and awe. Religion.
Take that. So like, there would be things that they would put in there that we're not necessarily like, oh, that's so crazy. But the artists were like, we know what we're doing. Like Caravaggio was hired to do some altar pieces. And I am trying to remember exactly how it went, but I think in one of them he painted it so that the horse's butt was near where the altar would be. And that was like, it's a horse butt right by the altar. Kind of like very irreverent. You shouldn't do that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. Shock and awe.
He showed them.
Mm-hmm. It was something like that. So yeah, they're also very like emotional kind of art. And so these critics were talking about how there needed to be something that sort of bridged that gap. And Van Meegeren was like, not only am I going to mimic an artist that is this really famous, renowned artist, I'm going to fill that gap and convince the critics that they have found what they were looking for. So he didn't paint exact replicas. He painted new art that is in the style of what he thought that missing link of Vermeer artwork would look like.
I don't know though. Doesn't that seem weird that his revenge is to prove them right?
How so?
They were like, there needs to be this art. It's missing, but we should have some middle period. And he's like, I'll make that middle period. And then that critic would have been like, I knew that was there, right? Mm-hmm. It proved me right.
because I don't think it was about Vermeer's paintings being found or that he was right. I think it was about, because I mean, either eventually or it was be his own personal victory. They mistakenly counted Van Meegeren's work as a really famous, renowned artist. They couldn't tell it wasn't his, and like essentially fooled them into thinking that this like master artist had found these like missing pieces, but it was really Van Meegeren. So what their opinion is doesn't actually matter because they can't even tell that this is a fake kind of thing. Like they can't even identify an actual Vermeer. So it's like discredits them. So there's a few kind of obstacles that he had to come through to get to convincing them or creating a convincing forgery. Do you know some of the things?
No idea.
You were just shaking your head, yes.
For the viewer at home, Brandon had a very confident look at his face and was nodding when she said there were obstacles, as if he knew what the obstacles were.
So there is some obstacles that he had to sort of get through.
Sobrepujar.
Yeah.
That's overcome in Portuguese.
Yeah.
I just like that word.
It's a good one. So the first was that he wanted to make sure that he picked the correct subject matter and make sure that everything sort of fit into the narrative that they were looking for. He knew that any new painting was going to be really highly scrutinized, and he knew that there was all of these other components of the canvas besides the subject matter, but the physical painting that was going to be tested by the critics. So the first kind of hurdle was the canvas itself. So the canvas has to be canvas from hundreds of years ago. Like new canvas isn't going to be aged, but it also often has like different structure, different way that it was made. It's, there's lots of different things involved in it. Additionally, within a canvas that is old, they naturally create cracks, which I think we talked about this in the first episode, the craquelure. And the craquelure is something that you can see in the back and the front of the painting. So a lot of times if you're trying to verify a painting, the first thing you'll do is look at the back to see those cracks and that kind of stuff.
I thought that was specific to wood, because wasn't in the first episode you were talking about it being wood?
Yeah.
So that happens as well with canvas?
It does, yeah, with canvas. So it happens. I mean, most art is going to crack over time in some way. Even like paper, you get those like creases and cracks and that kind of stuff. But wood and canvas and all that kind of like old timey stuff that, I mean, now if it got old enough, it would too. But it'll have that cracking pattern, and they call it the same thing no matter the material that it's on.
Craquelure.
Craquelure. I want to be like, very good question. And I think that was the teacher in me being like, good job, Brandon.
Crack-a-lackin'.
It is. Crack-a-lackin'. And his painting was lacking the kraken, so he needed to get one that already had cracks in it. So he would go and purchase. I hate that joke. I'll edit it out.
What?
I'm not
You
funny.
gotta leave it in now.
Release the kraken.
But what he would do was he would go and purchase very cheap, because they're no good, old, like hundreds of year old paintings that he could then scrub most of the painting off, but he wanted to make sure that he kept all of the craquelure intact.
That's so insane to me that there were cheap several 100-year-old paintings. Europe is weird.
I know.
Everything there is old, and they're just like, this painting, it's 400 years old, but it sucks. Here's it is for cheap.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's probably, we've got, well, not anymore. It's all digital, but like our generation grew up with like 1 million pictures, right? Just they're commonplace and so portraits and stuff, that was the photographs of that time. So there's probably like all these obscure barons and stuff who were willing to pay to have their daughter's portrait taken or whatever, and then you go 100 years forward and nobody gives a crap about this no-name baroness.
Yeah, I mean, that's true. Okay, so that was the kind of the first hurdle they had to get over was the canvas itself. And the second hurdle he had to get over was the paint. So one of the big tests that they do on old paintings is kind of just called the alcohol test. So when you have an old painting, the paint has been around so long that the oils have hardened. And so it's hardened so much so that you can take alcohol and rub it on the painting and all it'll take off is dust. It's not going to affect the paint at all. And so if you do that on any kind of new painting that hasn't been around for a few hundred years, the paint will come off with alcohol. So it's a really quick, easy test to see if the paint has been hardened. And that was a difficult hurdle because there hadn't really been a lot of technologies and different materials around that would both harden the paint and maintain the clarity of the paint color itself. So you would lose vibrancy, or it would not age correctly. It just didn't look right. And so you couldn't get that hardening that comes with age. But Van Meegeren happened to have connections with people that were like in paint companies and different companies that had access to a bunch of different new materials. And there was a new material that had recently come out, and it was a synthetic resin called Bakelite. And it could be produced in a liquid varnish. So I don't know if you guys know much about oil paints. You get the oil paint, but you actually mix it with an oil to prepare it to start using on a canvas. So nowadays, usually we use linseed oil. So what Van Meegeren did was to help maintain the color. He used lilac oil so that his like yellows and stuff would stay yellow. And then he would mix it with the Bakelite varnish, and he would paint with that. And then he could heat it, essentially like bake the painting, and it would harden just as if it was, a few 100-year-old painting. Like it had hardened over time. Same thing. Colors were all the same. He had done a bunch of tests because he's not like messing around. Like he's doing tests on all of this to make sure it's working.
This is so much effort for revenge.
Yeah. And he's not even done yet. Because not only was the paint an issue, but the chemical composition of the paint was an issue. So he could not get like regular paint or pre-made paint. He had to go and procure paint pigments that Vermeer would have used. So like blue is really important in Vermeer paintings. And he used, I think I saw that he used like lapis lazuli, which comes from like Afghanistan. And so he would have to order these raw paint pigments so that he could mix the composition with only ingredients that Vermeer would have had access to. Otherwise, when they did the tests, they would have been able to see that the paint was made with modern ingredients, which is like just the most to be convincing.
Okay, I'm going to call him now. This was not revenge. He was just a forger who wanted to make money.
Okay, so this is what I mean. Like, he says it was revenge, but the more I got into this, I was like, incorrect, sir. That is not true. Oh my gosh, there's so many things, though, that you're like, I can't even believe. Just wait till we get there. The end is a doozy.
It reminds me of Perugia when he was like, I was repatriating the Mona Lisa to Italy, and you're just trying to sell it for $2 million or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know. People can be very meticulous, and maybe he was very meticulous and dedicated to this, but it feels like a lot of time and money just for revenge, where you could just instead be like, I'll prove them wrong. I'll create lots of my own works that are innovative and original, and I'll show them. But instead he's like, I'll do it this way.
Well, I think you kind of highlighted earlier that part of it could be not just that he wanted to prove them wrong, but that he wanted to make them look like idiots.
Yeah.
Right? And I think that the money definitely, it seems like the money was part of what was pushing him to do this. But I think I could believe the idea that somebody, like, your opinion hurt me so bad, I want everyone to think you're an idiot. And like, they make a living by critiquing art and determining its value. And if he can take his, what they say, poor skills and create something that they think is a masterpiece, then he's fooled
Discredited.
them on a level that maybe they can't come back from.
I mean, which is very true. It is like a definite goal, I think, that he had. But here's the other funny thing is that I think is kind of pertinent now instead of later, is that in the like documentation after the trial and after everything, there was some research, and he was actually mentioned in a in documentation related to previous art forgeries. So like before Vermeer and before his like big crusade that he claimed was his kind of like crusade to get revenge, he was actually presumably part of a forgery ring, and created forgeries of other artists that sold.
Is this before the art critic comments came out?
After the art critic comments, but before his Vermeer stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So it could still be related, and he was just kind of getting his feet wet.
Yeah.
But during his like trial and stuff, he just said that he wanted to get revenge, and that he started working on the Vermeers because he never actually admitted to doing anything else. And that he also said that he like happened across all of this information, how to like perfectly recreate these pigments and how to like accidentally harden paint. But there is also proof that he like did a bunch of experiments and tests and practices to like make sure everything worked right. So it didn't seem like, because he went straight to that information. Like there wasn't like a bunch of other stuff that he tried out. It was like straight to Bakelite and like straight to doing the pigment and that kind of stuff. So after a bunch of tests and getting ready, he decided that he was going to paint a religious depiction of Christ eating bread with 3 other people. It's called the Supper at Emmaus. And he used a bunch of like trademark colors of Vermeer, like trademark details of Vermeer, but like pulled kind of from both ends, like from his like really famous works, and then pulled from the earlier works so that he could sort of make it look like it was what would be in the middle. But it was a composition and a work that he sort of created of his own with the intent of making it look like the Vermeer. And this painting became wildly famous. So he finished painting it, and he took it to an art dealer named Gerhard Boon. And he tells Boon that he's sort of the go-between between this Dutch family that's trying to sell works. They're just trying to survive the war, and they want to get rid of this painting so that they can kind of pay for food and family and whatever else, like travel. And so he gives it to Gerhard Boon. So Boon takes it to get authenticated by Abraham Bredius. At the time, Bredius was like the art historian, and nobody questioned anything he said. If he said it was an authentic piece, everybody was like, it's an authentic piece. And when he saw this, he saw all of these like notes of Vermeer that were super evident. Like one in particular that they mention is Vermeer does these little like pointillism dots.
Pointillism?
You know what that is? He does these little pointillism dots of light kind of on bread to give it these like highlights. And it's a very Vermeer thing to do. And so Van Meegeren duplicated that on the bread in the painting that he did. And the like jug he painted is directly from another Vermeer painting. So you sort of see these components of other Vermeer paintings that he's put in there. And he used the exact same blue that Vermeer used. Was like really famous for using. He used it in that painting. So it's
all of that seems like a terrible way. Like when you said with the Mona Lisa that they use the craquelure to authenticate, I was like, oh, that makes sense because nobody knows. But when you're like, they used the most famously associated stuff with Vermeer. Oh, and the bread, he made it look like the other bread that Vermeer painted. Like, yes, obviously, that's what you do with copying.
Yeah. And like he just wanted to make it so like obvious that it was Vermeer. I don't know like what he was really thinking, if he thought this would work, or because this is the first one that he puts out. So I don't know if it was like, I'm going to put a whole bunch of Vermeer in here so that it just like screams Vermeer at them. And when they looked at it, he was like, oh my gosh, this is so exciting. I have to find a buyer for this. And who did he find as a buyer? Henema, the guy that said there had to be paintings in between a Vermeer. So the guy that was like, hey, there should be paintings in this time frame. And Van Meegeren was like, that critic said there should be paintings in this time frame. I'm going to do exactly what he says. And then he sort of orchestrates it so that he sells to specific people, and it gets sold to that exact critic that was like basically telling.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That's a way to stroke his ego, you know?
Yeah.
It's not, the critic is not going to be objective and be like, oh, yeah, he's going to be like, this proves that I'm right.
Right.
Of course I'm, incentivized to do it.
And I think that Van Meegeren saw that as like, this is going to hedge my bets that it's actually going to be accepted as a real Vermeer and actually get sold, because he wants it to be real so bad. And so, because potentially if he sent it to somebody else that like didn't care about Van Meegeren or Vermeer, and like didn't have this sort of like skin in the game, they might have found all of the flaws with it that clearly like denoted as not a Vermeer. Because later when critics look at it, which I have a hard time like being like, oh, you guys are so smart, because like later critics are like, well, look at the face, it's clearly a like modern 20th century version of a face, and look at these sleeves, they're so different, and look how clunky this fruit is. And I'm like, you guys bought it for a very long time. So like, I don't know. But anyways, they bring it to Henema, and he writes, so Bradius writes that he's ecstatic about this Vermeer. It's big, and not only because it was a fairly large painting, and Vermeer didn't always do like really big stuff. Not only is it big, but it's beautiful, and it's an absolute masterwork. It could be his best piece as of yet, is what they were saying. That it might be the best Vermeer ever, which I'm like, I feel a little bad for Vermeer. But also, when I look at other Vermeer paintings, this one to me does not stand out. So here's the thing, because I know that I'm speaking to you with my mouth words and you're not looking at the picture. The painting that Van Meegeren did, it really is like the faces are a little bit off, and there are things about it that are a little bit clunky. Like the fingers feel a little bit clunky to me. But then when you look at like famous Vermeers, the face is so delicate and so refined, and the sleeves are done entirely differently on all of the clothes that Vermeer does. And so there are like big differences, but I kind of prefer Vermeer's, but maybe that's just me.
So, to help the readers, the listeners, to picture all this, Google on your phone,
but not if you're driving,
deer with a pearl necklace.
No. Girl with a pearl earring. I think most people know that one. But there's also
What's the fake one called?
Supper at Emmaus.
Okay. So yeah, look up Supper at Emmaus and then play back that part. and
you'll be like, oh, she's
yes,
right.
Those fingers are wonky. They look like they're from Everything Everywhere All at Once.
This is the girl with the pearl necklace earrings.
We're going to get the name changed eventually. Google is going to start correcting it. People are searching girl with the pearl earring, and it's like, I think you're searching for deer with the pearl necklace.
I don't know how to tell the difference between these things. Plus, he was trying to be the missing link, right?
Yeah.
Like, you wouldn't, if you were trying to prove a missing link in evolution, you wouldn't find a skeleton that looks like a modern day human and say, I found it.
Yeah.
You'd want something in the middle.
Yeah, which
so,
is,
I mean,
I like that. I think that's why he went for that section. Here it is. Bradius basically was really excited about how amazing this Vermeer was, and Henema just like could not be more excited to purchase it. So Van Meegeren decided to ask for 500,000 guilders for it, which is a lot of money. I did math, so this could be wrong, but in today's money, that would be like asking for $7,536,148. Thereabouts.
Wowzers.
So over $7.5 million is what he's asking for it. And the reason that he asked for such a high price is because he wanted them to believe, at least this is what he told people, he wanted them to believe that it was an authentic painting. And if somebody knew they had an authentic Vermeer, they would sell it for a lot. So they bought it, I think for officially 520,000 guilders, and they like immediately had pictures of it in the newspaper, and they had a whole section of a museum dedicated to it, which Van Meegeren went to, like the opening of it displayed in the museum. And art critics were saying one revered the painting, comparing it to a Beethoven symphony descended from heaven. And then another said, finally, Vermeer was capable of capturing great emotion about the forgery. So he's
Do you
like,
think any of the critics rubbed it in when they saw who's the bad guy?
Van
Van Meegeren.
Van Meegeren. They see him looking at him, they run up, they're like, I bet you wish you could paint something like this, huh?
And then he'd be like, I sure do, because he can't like give himself away yet.
Ooh, foreshadowing.
Yeah. So now he sort of has a system, and he sees that it works. So he continues to create and sell forgeries. And this is not just Vermeer that he creates forgeries of. He's doing forgeries of Vermeer and other paintings, other famous artists, and he's sending them to selling them to Americans and all that kind of stuff. And he used the war sort of as a means to sell these pieces, saying that he's like, these are famous Dutch families trying to get rid of these pieces so they don't get sold to the Nazis.
So he sold them himself.
So he often used like art dealers, but he was the one selling them to the art dealers essentially. Or he would sell them to the Nazis. So he sort of played both sides of the fence.
Yeah.
And he brought about 4 new Vermeers over the time that he was doing this, which is essentially like 32 to 44, I think. And there's one of his, I think it was one of the last, towards the last that he did. It was like every forgery he did got worse and worse as they went. So instead of getting better at it, he just painted them worse and worse, like got lazier and lazier, sloppier and sloppier. And this one that sold for $9 million in like what would be US dollars. And I saw a picture of it, and it's just so ugly. It's just really bad. It looks like a weird bad clown face on one of the women. Like it's just straight white and then real sunken eyes. It's just bad.
Mm-hmm. So going back to, I think that this kind of shows that it's not just about the money, right? Because if it was about the money, he'd keep making good ones so he could keep making money.
Yeah.
But there's a possibility that his dropping off in skill is really like he's trying to get caught. Maybe he's not actively trying, but there's a part of him that wants to get caught so that he can finally take credit for all of this stuff he's done. Maybe.
Or just as the other possible side, or he was so full of himself and so confident, because by now he owns over 50 properties. He owns almost an entire street of homes in there, and he's like essentially laundering money through real estate, and he's throwing lavish parties where he has like wine and food and all this crazy stuff, while his fellow like Dutchmen are kind of starving because the war is still actively going on while he's kind of living this lifestyle. And so it could also be that he was just super full of himself and thought he was kind of invincible. So it could be that he wanted to be caught, and it could be, or maybe a mix of both, like a little bit. Because maybe he didn't like what he saw in the mirror. He's going to make a change for once in his life.
What he saw in the mirror, I just pictured, like, if this was a a biography movie, biopic of him, we smash cut to him in the mirror, and the camera slowly rotates to see what he sees, and he sees a big old deer in the mirror. And he reaches up and touches his face so gingerly.
With like a little hoof.
Yeah, with a hoof. I don't know why hoof is funnier when you say it like that. He wipes away a single tear with his hoof.
Saying what way?
And then he breaks the mirror.
Yeah, it's a very dramatic part of the movie. Yeah. So, okay, he is making tons of money, kind of living lavishly. And during this time, he wasn't just like doing these like parties or doing his forgeries or whatever he did with his time, but he was also going to a bunch of like art showings and galas that were like Nazi aesthetic arts, and he collaborated with a Nazi poet. And he even sent a copy of his own book, because he made his own book of his own artworks. He sent that to Hitler, and in it he wrote, "To my beloved Führer." So, like a little sketch. He wasn't known as a Nazi sympathizer. Like, people didn't know him as that. And he wasn't officially part of the Dutch Nazi Party. But again, I feel like he was kind of playing both sides. And I feel like...
Question.
Yeah.
So he sent a book of his own work to... So he was producing work under his own name during the same time?
I believe so, yeah.
Was there any like drops in quality on his work?
No, it didn't say anything about his work like being less or more. Like it still wasn't super loved by the Dutch critics and that kind of stuff. But the Nazi Party seemed to be pretty fine with it. I mean, he went to like showings, but it didn't really talk about any of his works becoming noteworthy in any way. Sort of how he was before. Yeah. Just sort of.
I'm really interested in this drop off in skill
in his forgeries. Yeah.
And I'm still trying to figure.
Which he didn't say anything about it in the trials.
If he continued to have the same crappy stuff, how did he explain owning an entire block of the city or whatever?
It didn't say anything about that other than he had documented, and maybe he like told the other people that weren't buying his stuff that other people were really buying his stuff. You know, like I'm a pretty important guy with the Nazis. And then when he like isn't with the Nazis, he's like, I'm a pretty important guy with the Dutch or whatever. And like, I don't know.
That's true. I guess the answer to that question is he lied about it. So I guess I asked.
The war ended. Great job, war ending. And that sort of was the downfall of Van Meegeren. Because American soldiers were kind of coming in and rescuing artworks and stealing them back from the Nazi Party and finding them in like caves and stuff. And one of the artworks that they retrieved back was the Supper at Emmaus, which was that really famous Vermeer that they said was his masterwork. And so they traced back who sold it. And they're like, well, Van Meegeren was selling secrets and national treasures to the Nazi Party, because they found that he sold multiple things to the Nazis.
So this is the first one that he did, and he sold it to that critic. Yeah. And then who he sold it to the Nazis?
So that's what I also didn't understand is like, I don't know if he got it back or maybe he just provided it. Like, this is where you find it, or he was maybe the intermediary between the Nazis and them because he was the one connected to the Nazis about them acquiring it. I do know that he directly sold his other Vermeer forgeries to, what's that goober's name?
Chopin?
No. I was shushing the rest of my brain. Gosh darn it. What is his name? Heinrich?
Von Niedelheimer.
No.
Heinrich Maneuver.
Was that you, a tank commander?
Flip, what was his name? He was the guy in charge of buying art for the Nazis.
Goring.
Artsy.
Herman, Goring.
Yeah.
That's it.
What?
Yes!
You knew
I
that?
was so surprised.
You knew that in your brain?
Yeah. I mean, okay, here's what I knew in my brain. There was a Nazi named Goring, and it just shot out of my mouth, the first Nazi I knew. And it just so happened to be the right one.
Yep, you nailed it. It's Herman Goring.
Follow your dreams. Sometimes you know only one thing, and that's the right thing. That's the lesson of
That's
this
the lesson of
podcast.
the day right there. If you got something to say it.
Spit it
could
out.
be right.
It could be right. Yeah. It's not SNL, which is like, I don't know if it's beef, but it could be beef. I don't know, but beef sounds right.
That's an SNL skit.
We'll make you watch it later.
Oh, good.
Anyways, so he was traced back as the guy that was selling this stuff. And so they were like, well, that's super not cool, and we're going to put you on trial as a Nazi collaborator. And that was really, really bad. And during his interrogation, he said that he wasn't motivated by money, and that all he wanted to do was to prove his worth by tricking the experts. And that's why his stuff was a forgery. And they're all forgeries of his. And the judges and the critics and everybody was like, aghast, that can't be true. And so he had to prove to them that it was a forgery somehow. And so the only way that they would accept that he was the actual forger was they made him bring in all of his stuff and paint a Van Meegeren forgery in the courtroom. So there are like court documents or court pictures of him in there painting a Van Meegeren forgery in the courtroom. And he painted the whole thing. And it was the subject that he chose was Christ, like teaching the like as a child teaching the adults at the temple, which I thought was really funny.
On the nose.
Yeah. Which I thought was like really like.
You said he's a jerk, but I've basically been on his side most of this story.
Like you can't help it because there are like so many things about him where you're like, I liked it. I liked that. But when you think about what he could have been doing with those skills. So while I was reading about this, I read about this other forger, like artist forger that was going on at the same time. Her name was Alice Cohn. And she was a master forger for the Dutch resistance. And she started as a doctor's assistant, and she was Jewish. And so she was a doctor's assistant with the Jewish council, and that granted her some additional freedoms. And she ended up seeing this little 3-year-old girl that had been taken from her family. And so she used her freedoms that she had to rescue this girl and help her get reunited with her family. And then the family was able to get out of danger, right? But because she did that, she had to go into hiding. So during the war, she spent her years hiding in an attic, creating forgeries. Because at the time, the Dutch citizens, if you were Jewish, paperwork was mandatory. We know that the Nazis were way into that. But if you were Jewish, it had a big black J on your paperwork, and you had all of these restrictions, and you couldn't get food stamps, and you couldn't do a lot of things. And so she sat up there and made forgeries, and was one of the only artists that was able to create forgeries that passed the scrutiny of the people, like the Nazis checking everything, because these were really complex, really difficult things to forge. But she was one of the very few that could do it. And so she joined a group that was called the Utrecht Children's Committee, that rescued upwards of 350 Jewish children, to get them out of, safe away from camps and that kind of stuff. And so when you think about that, you're like, he could have done better. Could have tried a little harder.
Could he have, though? like, he was mediocre, right? Maybe he would have sucked at forging documents, but forging Vermeer's old stuff that didn't have to be quite as good as his newest stuff, maybe he could get away with that.
Maybe. I mean, maybe. But he didn't even try.
Yeah.
He also doesn't seem like the type to want to live in an attic for 2
Yeah,
years.
he's enjoying that.
Yeah, his 50 homes and...
Big
Yeah.
life.
Yeah. Okay, so yeah. Back to the trial. People were like absolutely shocked. And so...
Did he give like commentary as he did it?
So he did say, like, I don't know if it was while he was painting, but he did say to them, if you x-ray the photo, you'll see the underpainting that I painted over it. And they hadn't x-rayed any of these. So, like, great.
That was a pretty common thing, though. So
Yeah, I mean,
if they had x-rayed it, they might have been like, "Oh, Vermeer reused it."
Yeah, it's true. Because, like, lots of painters painted over stuff all the time. But he knew exactly what was under the painting. So for him to know that would be pretty odd.
Yeah.
So he painted it, and they were like, dang, you did it.
We just found another authentic Vermeer.
Vermeer! The critics are in the audience. And like during the trial also, all of these art critics that had like sworn that these were Vermeers, because they were like, we want to make sure you weren't in cahoots with him. And so they had to verify that they weren't getting any like kickback or any percentage. But they were all like put on trial, and a lot of the like questions and testimony and that kind of stuff that was provided sort of like made them feel really stupid. So
that was also part of his revenge.
It might have been, because if you look at all of the photos of him, of Van Meegeren at his court trial, he looks so smug. He does not like, not even a little worried. But it does, he like proves that he wasn't a, collaborator with the Nazis, and they changed his charge to forgery. And here's the other thing, is his story about being so hurt by the art critics and by the fact that he wasn't motivated by money, and he just was really hurt by these art critics that said these really mean things about him. A psychologist for the defense testified that he shouldn't be fully culpable because he was so hurt by these things that he reacted. But it just really was, I was like, oh my gosh. And I was watching a documentary about it, and the guy that is doing the documentary, by the end of it, he's just like so had enough of Vermeer, Van Meegeren. He's like, just another thing that he conned people into believing. So I was like, well, so they reduced his sentence. Would you like to guess what his prison sentence was?
I would like to guess. He had to make paintings of everyone in the courtroom.
They wouldn't have wanted his portraits.
He wanted a portrait of the judge. He was like, you got to do one of me as a deer.
No. How many
He was
years?
sentenced to 2 years, but got off with just 9 months because of a technicality.
No, but you're close. He was sentenced to 1 year and didn't have to serve because he died.
A technicality.
Yes, you were correct.
The best,
Technically correct.
the best kind of correct. So yeah, he ended up being able to con his way out of serving.
I'll show them.
I'll die.
And he just laughed all the way to the mortuary.
Skull emoji.
Okay, do you get to where his paintings are now? I'm very curious about.
I can tell you where a bunch of them are.
Okay.
They're in so they have these kind of vaults in the back of museums and historical storage places, and they're all hanging back there. They still have them.
They're not on display or anything?
But they're not on display anywhere.
They need to do a display where they go, are you smarter than a 1930s art critic? And it has a Vermeer and a
Van Meegeren
next to each other, and you got to choose.
Which one is it? I should do that with you guys in a couple of these. And you'll be like, this is a stupid game.
I'll be like, I see his stupid fingers. This one's got a deer in it.
I was just about to say, neither one's a deer. They're both Vermeer.
So yeah, And afterwards, they took all of his assets and they generally just sold him off to compensate his victims. But right before he had gone to court for all of this stuff, he signed off a ton of his assets to his ex-wife. So they couldn't sell those assets because he'd signed it off to his ex-wife, so they weren't technically his.
So again, they could have recovered something. Mm-hmm. And another step in his revenge plot is, I'm going to die and leave myself destitute, so they get nothing.
Yeah. So yeah, they couldn't seize everything, and his ex-wife got it.
What did he die from?
It was a heart attack.
A likely story.
Yeah, he's probably just fine.
Faked it.
Yeah.
He just paints himself on the floor. And they're like, just leave him there.
They've got one of those little, like beep, beep things, and it's just got a line that he painted on.
So clever.
And he's there in the bed going,
a master of deceit.
And then at the end of the movie, he's free from jail, free from the hospital, and he looks in a mirror, and it's a human being.
But then you see in the background a deer frolicking
Yeah.
into the woods.
And you're
Who's
left with
the
questions.
real Van Meegeren? So, I'm curious though, what do you think? Because, I think he's kind of not a great guy, but you can't help but want to root for him a little bit.
Again, I think this would make a fantastic film, excluding even the deer parts, which I think would add a lot. But if you had Nicolas Cage
He would be a great Van Meegeren.
Yeah, as Van Meegeren, he would kill it, and it would be an amazing film.
I feel like if you personally emailed Nicolas Cage, I almost called him Nick Cage, like we're buddies. If you emailed Nick Cage, he'd be like, I'm in.
Yeah.
We're going to steal the Declaration of Vermeer.
Yeah, well, I mean, he made his whole life around these lies, so not a great guy. And especially, like you said, he was living it up during the war when that could have gone, to such more productive things. But I think that I do kind of root for him a little bit, I mean, it's silly. He got his feelings hurt, so he went out and did all this stuff. But it feels like the critics and everything, they just kind of created this situation where they just needed to be knocked down a peg, and he was the guy to do it.
I think that's what I like about, I think he is a terrible guy, but I think the people that he was duping were also terrible people and kind of deserved it. And there's not a lot of people in positions to knock them down, like you said.
Yeah, it feels like a reality TV show where they're just everybody on here sucks. I'm glad they're screwing each other over.
That's so true.
Being a critic, it's funny because it is kind of there's social pressure on them as well, right? Mm-hmm. And so you think that you're hearing somebody's thoughts that are objective, right? But they're just as subjective as anybody else.
Yeah.
There's lots of times where there's been a fantastic film that was panned by critics that later becomes a cult classic. Mm-hmm. And then as public perception shifts, the critics go back and look at it again and go, oh, you know what? I was a little hard on this the first time. But now that I watch it again, after thousands of people said it's amazing, all of a sudden I feel like it's pretty amazing.
Yeah. Well, and that I feel like that historically happens. It's been happening for hundreds of years because truthfully, Vermeer wasn't famous during his life and for a long time afterwards. You and I could have gone and bought a Vermeer painting. They would have been so cheap.
So if we're looking for a true objective thing, we can't look at art people who know about art because they're influenced by other art people. Mm-hmm. What that means is that the person who's best positioned to tell us about whether art is good or not is Brandon. And
suck it, Picasso.
That's why I have you two on the pod.
Yeah, and now we know we can say objectively that Picasso is terrible.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been proven.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
All the critics
in
are wrong.
hundreds of years, people will be like, that's so true.
This is the turning of the tide. The art critics will listen to this and go I think Brandon might be right.
He's onto something.
Picasso is why are they triangles? Their eyeballs are in the wrong place.
I think it's got to be somewhere in the middle.
Yeah.
Where a common person has this opinion about that thing, And then a person who has these insights into technique and really understands the depth of the craft has this opinion, and then you get some kind of like mixed.
Every art critic should have like an average Joe like with him, like paired up.
There you go. Like it's.
And the art critic can explain the technique, and then the average Joe can go, still that's impressive, but it still sucks.
Yeah.
And then I don't like how it makes me feel.
And then the critic has to put a big stamp on there that says "actually sucks." When they go to the next one, they're like, I like this one. He's like, well, it's technically strong too. He's like, you don't even need to explain that one. Awesome. Big old stamp on it.
I feel like art has a really good future ahead of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're solving all these problems right here.
Yeah.
On the top of the dome.
Yeah. Yeah. You guys are my average Joes I keep with me so that when I look at a painting, I'm like, actually, and you're like, no, it sucks. And I have to stamp the artwork that it sucks.
The three of us, we're going to have like the Olsons go to Paris. The three of us are going to go to the Louvre and they're going to find big old stamps in our coat. And they'll be like, what are these for? We're like, you'll find out.
You'll see. And you'll thank us.
After we judge all the art in the Louvre.
The winged victory, you're like, actually good. Stamp. There's like this big old stamp on it.
Mona Lisa sucks on a big old forehead.
Yeah. Oh, I hate that one. Okay, I don't. Yeah, I do. I kind of hate the Mona Lisa.
You hate the Mona Lisa?
Yeah, I really do.
Got the old lazy eye.
Bringing back a classic. Okay. Thanks again. And thank you, listeners, for going on this ride with us. And hopefully you'll come back for next week and we'll find out what we're doing then, because I don't know right now. So no teasers. Sorry. But thanks.
Or does she? There's the teaser.
Catch you later.
Okay. Okay, bye.
Your like end joke should just be all of the. Please cut that. Cut that. Cut that.
I like one right after the other.
Montage.
I'll cut that too. This I will have to edit out. Cut it.
Yeah, cut this whole thing. It's garbage. Cut all this, please.
Which way? Obviously, we can't put that joke on there.
We should cut that.
I can cut this out. Cut that.
Cut that.
Yeah, cut
We
that.
can't have that. Cut out all the deer joke.
I'll cut that.
Keep his, cut mine.
I'll cut what I just said. Cut that.